The massive alien ships appeared in Earth's sky like dark storm clouds, their hulls gleaming silver against the blue atmosphere. They moved in perfect formation, blocking out the sun over major cities across the planet. People stopped in the streets to stare upward, some pointing, others running for cover. Admiral James Blackwood stood on the observation deck of humanity's largest space station, watching the alien fleet through reinforced windows. His gray hair was neat, his uniform pressed, but his jaw was tight with tension. 25 years of military service had taught him to recognize a threat when he saw one. "Sir, incoming transmission from the lead vessel," announced Lieutenant Emma Thompson from her communication station. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly as she worked the controls. "Put it through," Blackwood replied. The main screen flickered to life, revealing a tall alien figure with pale blue skin and 4 dark eyes. He wore elaborate robes that seemed to shift colors like oil on water. Behind him stood 6 other creatures, each clearly from different alien species, but all carrying themselves with the same air of absolute authority. "Humans of Earth," the lead alien spoke, his voice somehow translating perfectly into English. "I am Ambassador HFY of the Galactic Council. We represent 12 advanced civilizations that have maintained peace and order throughout this galaxy for over 800 years. Blackwood said nothing, his expression carefully neutral. He had read the classified reports about first contact with these aliens 3 years ago. He knew what was coming. "Your species has expanded beyond your home system at an alarming rate," HFY continued. "You have colonized 17 worlds without council permission. You have developed weapons and technologies that concern us. Most importantly, you have shown a disturbing tendency toward violence and unpredictability." On Earth's surface, news broadcasts were already showing the alien ships. Crowds gathered in city centers, some panicking, others standing in stunned silence. Government leaders held emergency meetings behind closed doors. Captain Rebecca Hayes sat at the diplomatic table in the station's main conference room. She was younger than Blackwood, with sharp green eyes and brown hair pulled back in a simple bun. As Earth's chief negotiator, she had been preparing for this moment for months. But preparation and reality were very different things. The other council representatives stepped forward, each adding their voice to HFY's declaration. One looked like a giant insect with crystalline wings. Another resembled a walking tree with glowing bark. A third was completely covered in what appeared to be living metal. "The Galactic Council has dealt with species like yours before," said the insect-like alien, her voice buzzing with harmonics. "Young races that believe they can ignore established order. Aggressive civilizations that think strength gives them the right to expand without limits." Hayes leaned back in her chair, her fingers pressed together in front of her face. She listened without interruption, her expression giving nothing away. "We have come to offer you a choice," HFY announced, raising one long-fingered hand for emphasis. "The same choice we have offered to over 200 species throughout galactic history. Submit to Council authority. Surrender all military vessels and weapons systems. Accept status as a protected vassal species under our guidance." The metal-covered alien spoke next, his voice like grinding gears. "You will be relocated to suitable worlds within Council space. Your population will be managed at sustainable levels. Your resources will contribute to the greater galactic civilization. In return, you will receive protection, technology, and the wisdom that comes from joining an established order." Blackwood felt his stomach clench. He had read the files on what protection meant. Entire species reduced to slave labor. Worlds stripped of their natural resources. Cultures erased and replaced with council-approved alternatives. "You have 72 Earth hours to consider this generous offer," HFY continued. "If you accept, the transition will be peaceful and orderly. If you refuse..." He paused, letting the threat hang in the air. "Well, no species has ever been foolish enough to refuse. The consequences would be most unfortunate." The conference room fell completely silent. Outside, the alien ships continued their ominous patrol above Earth's major population centers. On the surface, military bases were secretly activating emergency protocols, but their weapons seemed laughably primitive compared to the technology hovering overhead. Hayes finally spoke, her voice quiet but clear. 72 hours. "Indeed," HFY replied, apparently pleased by her reasonable tone. "We understand this is a significant decision. However, our experience suggests that most species reach the correct conclusion quite quickly once they understand the reality of their situation." Hayes nodded slowly, as if considering his words carefully. Then something changed in her expression. Her lips curved upward in what might have been a smile, but there was nothing warm or friendly about it. It was cold, calculating, and somehow deeply unsettling. "How very generous of you," she said, her voice carrying an odd note that made several of the council representatives shift uncomfortably. The smile never reached her eyes. Instead, those green eyes seemed to hold secrets, as if she knew something that the mighty Galactic Council did not. Something important. Something that would change everything. Kethvar stared at her for a long moment, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence. There was something about that human expression that bothered him, though he could not say why. In 8 centuries of conquest, no species had ever looked at the council with anything but fear or desperate hope. This human woman looked at them like she was solving a puzzle. "We await your response," he said finally, though his voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. The transmission ended, leaving the humans alone with their impossible choice and that cold, knowing smile that suggested they had been expecting this moment all along. The Council's flagship Dominion's Edge was the size of a small city, floating in the darkness between Earth and its moon. Inside the main command center, 12 different alien species gathered around a massive holographic display showing Earth and its surrounding space. General Vorthan was the largest being in the room, standing nearly 10 feet tall with thick gray skin and arms like tree trunks. He leaned over the tactical display, studying Earth's pathetic defenses with obvious amusement. "Look at this," he rumbled, his deep voice filling the chamber. "Chemical rockets. Metal projectiles. Energy shields that barely function. Their most advanced weapons are centuries behind what we gave our janitors." Admiral Ziratek coiled her serpent-like body around her command station, her scales shimmering under the blue light of the displays. She had conquered 4 to 7 worlds in her long career, and humans looked no different from any other primitive species. "The fear patterns are exactly what we expected," she reported, reviewing data streaming from Earth's surface. "Mass panic in population centers. Government emergency sessions. Military forces scrambling around like insects when you kick their nest." On the main screen, Earth's news networks showed chaos across the planet. Crowds filled the streets of major cities, some people running, others standing and staring at the alien ships overhead. Government buildings were surrounded by security forces. Military bases buzzed with frantic activity as soldiers loaded weapons and prepared defenses that everyone knew were useless. Councillor Hex Ra, whose body looked like living crystal with light pulsing through transparent veins, laughed at the human broadcasts. "Listen to their leaders," she said, playing an audio clip. "We will stand united against this threat. We will never surrender our freedom." Such brave words from such weak creatures. Ambassador Kethvar nodded approvingly as he reviewed intelligence reports. The psychological profile matches perfectly. Humans show typical precapitulation behavior. Initial defiance followed by growing despair as reality sets in. We should have their surrender within 48 hours. The council members shared stories from their vast experience. Commander Thekdon, whose metal skin reflected the room's lights, told them about the Veltak species. They also spoke of unity and resistance. Now they mine crystals in the outer rim. Very productive workers once properly motivated. General Vorthan pulled up holographic records of previous conquests. The Mordane had better technology than these humans. Plasma weapons, quantum shields, faster-than-light communication. They lasted 6 days against our fleet. These primitives will surrender before we even fire a shot. What the aliens could not see were the signals flowing beneath Earth's normal communications. Hidden deep in the planet's internet traffic, quantum-encrypted messages moved between secret facilities around the world. Ancient computers that had been sleeping for decades suddenly came online. Satellite dishes hidden in remote mountains began receiving data from sources throughout the galaxy. Dr. Michael Webb sat in a plain office building in Switzerland, staring at screens that showed information the Council never knew existed. His aide, Colonel David Barnes, stood beside him reading reports from human agents scattered across alien space. "All Prometheus units report ready status," Barnes said quietly. "We have people inside their military bases, their government buildings, their research facilities. Some have been there for 20 years. Webb nodded, his expression calm. While the Council saw panic on Earth's surface, he saw something very different. Every emergency meeting was actually a coordination session. Every frantic military movement was positioning forces according to plans made decades ago. The chaos was real, but it was controlled chaos. "Sir, we're receiving status updates from operatives throughout Council space," Barnes continued. "Lisa Morgan confirms she has complete technical specifications for all Council ship classes. Robert Clark has mapped their supply lines and communication networks. Jennifer Adams has documented 8 centuries of their war crimes." On the Council flagship, the aliens continued to analyze what they thought they understood. Intelligence Officer Quintel, whose body was covered in sensory tendrils that twitched constantly, reviewed human military capabilities. Their space fleet consists of 23 vessels, none larger than our escort ships, he reported. Their weapons use primitive explosive chemistry and simple energy projection. Their defensive systems are barely capable of stopping meteorites. The council members found this information both satisfying and boring. After 800 years of conquest, weak species had become routine. They had perfected a system that worked every time: show overwhelming force, offer generous terms, wait for surrender, then slowly implement control measures. The humans are actually quite entertaining, chuckled Admiral Zerotech, reviewing intercepted communications. Their military leaders keep talking about preparation and readiness. Preparation for what? Readiness to surrender? General Vorthan studied orbital scans of Earth's major cities. I count 4 to 7 million people in this city alone. Once we relocate them to work colonies, they will provide excellent labor for the mining operations in Sector 7. The Council's confidence was absolute. They had conquered species with better technology, stronger militaries, and more advanced civilizations. Humans were nothing special. Just another young race that had grown too quickly and needed to be brought under proper management. As the countdown timer showed 55 hours remaining, the council members began discussing post-conquest logistics. Which human populations would be relocated where? Which planets would be strip-mined for resources? Which human technologies might be worth studying before being classified and controlled? None of them noticed the subtle changes in the quantum field readings around their flagship. None of them detected the nearly invisible probes that had been scanning their vessels for the past 6 hours. None of them realized that every word they spoke, every plan they made, was being recorded and transmitted to locations throughout human space. The cold smile that had bothered Kethvar was spreading to human faces across the galaxy, as operatives who had waited decades for this moment finally received their activation codes. The countdown timer in the hidden bunker beneath Switzerland showed 36 hours remaining. 3 miles underground, past layers of steel and concrete that could survive a direct nuclear strike, the real Earth was finally waking up. General Patricia Stone stood before a wall of screens that stretched from floor to ceiling. Each screen showed a different part of the galaxy, and on every screen, small green dots were beginning to flash. Each dot represented a human being who had been living a life for years, sometimes decades. Project Prometheus is fully active, she announced to the room full of officers. We now have confirmed contact with operatives in every council territory. Dr. Michael Webb walked to the center of the room, his footsteps echoing in the vast underground chamber. Around him, hundreds of technicians worked at computer stations, coordinating the largest intelligence operation in human history. Ladies and gentlemen, Webb said, his voice carrying clearly through the bunker's communication system. For 90 years, the galaxy has seen humanity as chaotic and unpredictable. They were half right. We are unpredictable, but not because we are chaotic. We are unpredictable because we think differently than they do. On one of the main screens, a woman appeared. She had dark hair and kind eyes, and she was standing in what looked like an alien factory. Her name was Lisa Morgan, and for 12 years, she had been living on the Council's primary shipbuilding world. This is Engineer Morgan reporting from Keth Prime, she said, her voice transmitted across impossible distances through quantum channels the Council had never discovered. I have complete technical specifications for every Council ship class. Their hulls have a critical weakness at the power junction points. Their shields operate on fixed frequencies that can be disrupted. Their weapons systems have a 2-second reload delay that can be exploited. Another screen showed a man in mechanic's coveralls standing in what appeared to be a massive military base. Robert Clark had spent 15 years working as a maintenance worker on the Council's most secure facility. This is Agent Clark from Central Command, he reported. I have blueprints for every building, codes for every security system, and schedules for every supply shipment. Their ammunition storage is located in sections 12 through 18. Their communication array has 3 critical relay points. Their command center uses a single emergency exit that can be sealed from the outside. Webb smiled as more reports came in from across the galaxy. The Council thought they understood humanity, but they had made a fundamental mistake. They assumed that because humans were aggressive, they must also be impulsive. They never considered that human aggression might be patient, calculated, and incredibly long-term. The Council has ruled for 800 years using the same playbook, Webb explained to his staff. Same ultimatum, same timeline, same tactics. They never changed because they never had to. Why would they suspect that someone might be taking notes? Commander Thomas Wright pulled up another set of displays showing human technology that the Council had never seen. While they thought we were primitive, we were reverse engineering every piece of their equipment we could find. Their stealth systems, their energy weapons, their faster-than-light engines. We didn't just copy them. We improved them. The truth was staggering in its scope. Every time the Council had made contact with a human colony, they had unknowingly recruited human spies. Every cultural exchange program had placed human observers in alien society. Every trade agreement had given humans access to Council technology and intelligence. On Earth's surface, the apparent chaos continued. News cameras showed crowds in the streets, government officials making desperate speeches, military forces preparing for hopeless battles. But 3 miles below ground, General Stone was watching something entirely different. All surface activity is proceeding according to plan, reported Colonel Barnes. The Council's sensors are detecting exactly what we want them to detect. Fear, panic, and military preparations that appear completely inadequate. What the Council could not see were the real preparations. Hidden factories that had been disguised as civilian facilities were now producing weapons based on stolen and improved Council designs. Secret shipyards buried in asteroid fields were launching vessels that had been under construction for decades. Communication networks that appeared to be simple internet traffic were actually coordinating the movements of millions of people. Captain Rebecca Hayes sat in her diplomatic quarters, no longer bothering to hide her true nature. The scared negotiator act was over. She reviewed final reports from human agents throughout Council space, and her cold smile grew wider with each page. Agent Jennifer Adams appeared on one of the screens, standing in what looked like a Council government building. She had worked as a translator for 8 years, with access to classified files that documented the Council's true history. "I have everything," she reported. 8 centuries of conquest records. Details of species enslaved, worlds destroyed, civilizations erased from history. Complete documentation of every war crime, every broken promise, every lie they told conquered peoples. Webb nodded with satisfaction. The military intelligence was important, but this was the real weapon. For 800 years, the Council had controlled the galaxy's narrative. They decided what history was recorded, what truth was allowed to be spoken, what hope was permitted to exist. The Council's greatest strength was never their technology or their military might, Webb said. It was their ability to make conquered species believe that resistance was impossible, that Council rule was natural and inevitable. General Stone activated the final communication channel, connecting her to every human operative in the galaxy. Thousands of faces appeared on screens throughout the bunker, each one representing years of careful preparation and patient sacrifice. "Tomorrow, the galaxy learns that the impossible is possible," she announced. "That tyrants can fall, that freedom can be fought for and won, and that sometimes the best way to answer a threat is with a cold smile and a plan that's been 90 years in the making." The countdown timer showed 18 hours remaining, but humanity was no longer counting down to surrender. They were counting down to revelation. The Council fleet moved into Earth's solar system like hungry predators approaching wounded prey. Admiral Vorthan stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching his sensors with complete confidence. In 800 years of conquest, this part was always the same. A few desperate attacks, some brave speeches, then inevitable surrender. "Human vessels detected," reported his tactical officer. 23 ships, just as our intelligence predicted. They appear to be moving into defensive positions around their home planet. Vorthan laughed, a deep rumbling sound that shook the bridge windows. 23 primitive ships against a fleet of 300 Council vessels. This will be over before it begins. But something was wrong with the sensor readings. The human ships appeared to be alone one moment, then suddenly there were more of them. Many more. "Sir," the tactical officer said, his voice uncertain. "I'm detecting additional human vessels. They seem to be appearing from nowhere." Across the solar system, sleek ships began decloaking around the Council fleet. They were nothing like the primitive vessels in the intelligence reports. These ships gleamed with advanced armor and weapons that looked disturbingly familiar to Council technology, but somehow different. Improved. Captain William Foster stood on the bridge of the human flagship Defiance, watching the alien fleet with calm eyes. His crew worked at their stations with practiced efficiency, implementing battle plans that had been rehearsed for decades. "All ships report ready for Operation Prometheus," his communications officer announced. Foster nodded. "Signal all units. Begin the demonstration." The first exchange of fire lit up space with brilliant flashes of energy. The Council expected their superior weapons to cut through human defenses like paper. Instead, they watched in growing horror as their most powerful blasts splashed harmlessly against human shields that adapted and strengthened with each hit. Impossible, Vorthan growled, staring at his tactical displays. Our weapons should be cutting them apart. How are their shields absorbing our full energy output? The answer came in the form of human return fire. Precise beams of energy that seemed to know exactly where to strike each Council ship for maximum damage. The humans weren't just fighting back. They were targeting specific systems with surgical accuracy. They're hitting our shield generators, the tactical officer reported in panic. They know exactly where our weak points are located. Foster watched his tactical display with satisfaction. 12 years of intelligence gathered by Lisa Morgan was paying off perfectly. Target the command frequency relays on the lead vessels, he ordered. Colonel Barnes' analysis indicates their fleet coordination depends on those specific systems. Across the galaxy, humanity's hidden network activated simultaneously. On Keth Prime, Lisa Morgan abandoned her cover identity and led a team of human saboteurs into the main shipyard. Security guards who had worked alongside her for years never suspected she was anything more than a dedicated engineer. Disable the reactor cores in sections 7 through 12, she ordered her team through concealed communication devices. Those ships won't be reinforcing the Earth fleet if they can't leave dock. On the Council's central military base, Robert Clark walked calmly through corridors he had mopped and maintained for 15 years. His janitor's uniform gave him access to areas that even high-ranking officers couldn't enter without special permission. Ammunition storage compromised, he reported as explosions began echoing through the base's lower levels. Supply lines to the outer fleets have been severed. They're fighting with whatever they brought with them. But the real devastation wasn't military. It was truth. Jennifer Adams stood in the Council's primary communication center, her translator credentials giving her access to every broadcast system in their network. For 8 years, she had quietly copied files, recorded conversations, and documented atrocities that the Council thought were safely hidden in classified archives. Citizens of the galaxy, her voice rang out across thousands of worlds in hundreds of languages. For 8 centuries, you have been told lies about your history, your freedom, and your future. The broadcasts began simultaneously on every Council communication channel. Video recordings of Council meetings where they discussed enslaving entire species. Audio files of commanders laughing about destroying planets that resisted. Documents showing how they had deliberately erased the history of conquered peoples. On Zara Prime, the enslaved Veltac workers suddenly learned that their original homeworld hadn't been destroyed by natural disaster as they had been told. It had been strip-mined to death by the Council, and their people sold into slavery to hide the evidence. On Kef Station, indentured Mordain laborers discovered that their children weren't being educated in Council schools. They were being used as test subjects in military experiments. Admiral Ziratek watched her communication systems in horror as the truth spread across her territory like wildfire. Cut the broadcasts, she ordered desperately. Jam all frequencies. But it was too late. The truth was spreading faster than her technicians could stop it. Worse, the species under Council control weren't just learning about their past. They were joining the fight. General Stone watched the tactical displays from her underground bunker as the Council's grip on the galaxy began to crumble. Rebellion confirmed in 12 sectors, she reported to her staff. Former Council subjects are seizing weapons depots, communication centers, and government buildings. The space battle around Earth became secondary to the revolution spreading across Council territory. Species that had been enslaved for generations were rising up, armed with weapons stolen from Council supplies and guided by human intelligence networks. Foster received a priority communication from Admiral Vorthan himself. The massive alien's face appeared on his screen, no longer confident and threatening, but desperate and confused. What do you want? Vorthan demanded. What are your terms for ending this madness? Foster's expression remained calm, but his eyes were cold as steel. The same terms you offered us, Admiral. Surrender all military vessels. Submit to our authority. Accept the consequences of 8 centuries of tyranny. The cold smile that had started with Captain Hayes was now spreading across human faces throughout the galaxy, as the galaxy's former victims realized that the impossible had become inevitable. The diplomatic chamber aboard humanity's flagship looked nothing like the cold, intimidating rooms where the Council had held their meetings for centuries. Soft lighting replaced harsh spotlights. Real plants from Earth grew in decorative containers. Chairs were designed to accommodate different alien species comfortably rather than to make them feel small and powerless. Captain Rebecca Hayes sat across from what remained of the Galactic Council leadership. The 12 proud species that had ruled the galaxy for 800 years now looked broken and confused. Their perfect formation was gone. Their ceremonial robes were wrinkled and stained. Their voices, once commanding and absolute, were now quiet and uncertain. Former Admiral Vorthan, his massive frame somehow seeming smaller than before, stared at the evidence displayed on the table between them. Thousands of documents, video recordings, and audio files that proved every crime the Council had committed across 8 centuries of rule. "How long have you been watching us?" he asked, his deep voice barely above a whisper. Captain William Foster, standing beside Hayes, answered without emotion. "Since first contact. Every diplomatic meeting, every trade negotiation, every cultural exchange program. We were always learning, always preparing, always remembering." Dr. Michael Webb entered the chamber carrying a tablet containing humanity's final terms. Unlike the ultimatums the Council had delivered to hundreds of species, this document offered genuine choices. "The evidence against your Council is overwhelming," Webb stated, his voice calm but firm. "Genocide against 4 to 7 species. Slavery affecting over 200 worlds. Cultural destruction spanning 12 sectors. The documented suffering includes detailed records of every atrocity committed in your name." Kethvar, the former ambassador who had delivered the Council's ultimatum just days before, looked at the humans with something approaching desperation. "What happens to us now? What happens to our people?" Hayes leaned forward, her expression serious but not cruel. "That depends entirely on your choices going forward. Council species that demonstrate genuine commitment to reform and justice will be welcomed as partners in building a new galactic civilization. Those who prefer the old ways of domination and control will find themselves isolated and irrelevant." The transformation was already happening across the galaxy. On hundreds of worlds, species that had served as the Council's subjects for generations were making contact with human coordinators. But these weren't conquest meetings. They were partnership discussions. Lisa Morgan, her cover as an alien shipyard worker finally blown, stood before the assembled Kethvarian engineering corps. The same beings who had built the Council's war machines for decades now listened to her with something they hadn't felt in centuries: hope. "Your people build beautiful ships," she told them honestly. "Your engineering skills are extraordinary. Now imagine what you could create if you designed them for exploration and discovery instead of conquest and intimidation." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Kethvarian engineers began redesigning their vessels, removing weapons systems and adding scientific equipment. Within hours, they were submitting plans for ships that could explore distant galaxies, study new phenomena, and carry peaceful expeditions to unknown worlds. Robert Clark found himself surrounded by former Council military personnel on the central base. Soldiers who had spent their careers following orders to suppress and control other species now looked to him for guidance about what to do with their skills and training. "You know how to maintain order and provide security," he told them. "The galaxy still needs those skills. But instead of using them to keep people down, we need you to help protect the freedom we're building together." General Patricia Stone addressed the combined human command staff from the strategic headquarters bunker. Around her, screens showed peaceful transitions taking place across dozens of worlds as former Council territories chose their own futures. "This was never about replacing Council tyranny with human rule," she explained to her officers. "It was about proving to the galaxy that cooperation is stronger than domination, that diversity creates more value than uniformity, that freedom is more powerful than fear." The evidence of that proof was spreading rapidly. On Zara Prime, the Veltak people were rebuilding their original culture using historical records that human agents had secretly preserved. On Kef Station, Mordane families were being reunited with children who had been taken for Council experiments. Jennifer Adams found herself serving as a translator once again, but this time she was helping species communicate with each other as equals rather than translating orders from their masters. The communication networks that had once spread Council propaganda now carried messages of hope and cooperation between worlds that had been isolated from each other for centuries. Hayes delivered humanity's final message to the galaxy through every available communication channel. Her words were translated into thousands of languages by human operatives who could finally reveal their true identities and purposes. For 8 centuries, you were told that conquest was natural, that some species were meant to rule while others were meant to serve, that resistance to tyranny was impossible, she said, her voice reaching billions of beings across the galaxy. "Today, we offer proof that those were lies. Cooperation is stronger than coercion. Diversity creates more possibilities than conformity. Hope is more powerful than despair." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Species that had been enemies under council rule began reaching out to each other. Worlds that had been stripped of resources started sharing what they had with neighbors who needed help. Technologies that had been restricted to council elites were freely shared among all who could benefit from them. Kethvar looked around the diplomatic chamber one last time, seeing humans and aliens working together as equals for the first time in his long life. "What do you call this new system?" he asked quietly. Hayes smiled, but this time it wasn't cold or calculating. It was warm, genuine, and filled with the kind of hope that tyrants across the galaxy had tried to destroy for 800 years. "We call it freedom," she said simply. "And it's available to anyone willing to choose it." The galaxy's long nightmare was finally over. Its greatest dream was just beginning.